All right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first event in the Tippie Women's Summit series. My name is Ashley Durham, and I am the Director of Alumni Relations at the Tippie College of Business and one of the coordinators for the Tippie Women's Summit series. Historically, the Tippie Women's Summit is a one-day conference-style event hosted by the college in Iowa City in conjunction with Women's History Month. But due to the ongoing pandemic, we had to get a bit creative with our programming and decided to offer a series of virtual events. So I'm so glad you're all here to experience our new virtual Tippie Women's Summit. You can find the registration for all of our alumni events on the alumni page of the Tippie website, which is tippie.uiowa.edu/alumni. Thank you again for being here, and I hope to see you at some of our other Tippie Women's Summit events later this month. I am excited to have Beth Livingston kick off our series with her presentation on integrating work and life. What does the future look like for work-life management? I'm also delighted to have Dean Kristof Brown here to also welcome all of you. Quickly, I'd like to mention a few upcoming alumni programs before I introduce Dean Kristof Brown. The Tippie Young Alumni Board is accepting applications for vacant board positions. Applicants must hold a BBA from the college and must have graduated within the last 5 years. Applications will be accepted until March 18th. As I mentioned, we're hosting events every week for the Tippie Women's Summit series. So for a list of all of the upcoming events and their dates and times, check the webpage. Our next Tippie webinar will take place on Wednesday, April 14th. Join us as Stephen Courtwright will share a presentation on toxic leadership and how to address it. Finally, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. We have enabled the live transcription service offered by Zoom for our hearing impaired guests. You can probably see the words at the bottom of your screen. If you don't want the transcription on during this program, you do have the option to turn it off. You can go to the More button, which should be located at the bottom of the screen, click it, and you should see Hide Transcriptions or Subtitles. That will remove the live transcription. If you do want to use the transcription service but finds that the words are too small, you can click the subtitle settings and that will open up another window where you can increase the text size. Again, these are all auto-generated transcriptions by Zoom and they're only available in English. Additionally, you can submit questions to us through the Q&A panel. Just click the Q&A button on your meeting controls to open it, type your question and click send. Ask questions at any time and we'll collect these and do our best to address them all during the Q&A. Finally, I wanted to remind everyone that all of our virtual presentations are uploaded to the college's YouTube page with closed captions a few days following our live webinar event. Now, after getting through all of that, I'd like to introduce Dean Amy Kristof Brown. A highly respected faculty member and researcher, Amy served as the college's Senior Associate Dean before stepping into the role of Dean on December 1st, 2020. Thanks for being here today, Amy, and I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Ashley. This is a terrific opportunity. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. I look forward to next year when we're all sitting in a room together and have other people joining us, perhaps virtually from a distance. But it's a delight to be here today to kick off our Tippie Women's Summit. This is one of our most exciting sets of programming that we do all year. So I love it, and I can't think of a better person to kick it off today than Dr. Beth Livingston. Dr. Livingston is an assistant professor in our management and entrepreneurship department. She joined us just a few years ago after coming from the Industrial and Labor Relations College at Cornell University. She received her PhD at the University of Florida, and she is particularly well suited for today because she talks about issues that she studies in her research, which include areas of discrimination, gender, many things, including sisterhood, her latest article on intimate partner violence and how it's a workplace issue, as well as just a personal issue, recently published just in Harvard Business Review. She does a tremendous amount of consulting and works with great companies like Accenture and Yves Saint Laurent. She's fabulous in everything that she does, and I'm delighted to welcome her here today. So I'll turn it over to you, Beth, and I can't wait to hear what you have for us this afternoon.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. And thank you, Ashley, for all the hard work that you have done to put this together. I am so pleased with, the just rousing excitement and engagement that we have seen from people registering to come to the event today. Um, and so I thank you for the opportunity to talk. And so we are going to talk a little bit today about integrating work and life. That might seem a little strange, I think, because obviously this past year has been for some of us a nightmare of trying to manage and balance work and life. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and I think it makes it a perfect topic to start off our speaker series. Um, I want to give a quick note here that we're going to be talking about work and family and life, and there are lots of different ways that that could look like for you. And so I encourage you guys, as we're going through this, as I'm going through this talk today, to please engage with the Q&A. We're going to leave some time at the end to answer questions, and it will also give me stuff to reach out, write blog posts about, as well as to reach out to you guys afterwards if we're not able to get to your questions. So I'm going to go through the talk and talk about some things to get you thinking, and hopefully think about your life and your work in a little bit of a different way. So please feel free to engage in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to that at the end of the session. So today I'm going to talk about work and family and work and life. And it's a really interesting topic because it's something we live every day, but we don't often talk about what that means for our life. And so when I talk about this, I like to think about it as sort of this intersection of different spheres, right? And a lot of different things. And this is just an example. You might, have, well, when I walk into my job, I'm a manager and I put my manager hat on. You might hear people talk about it that way. Um, Perhaps, when I get home, I put my mom hat on or my wife hat, or, you put your husband hat on or your partner, or your daughter hat, your aunt hat, all of these different things that you go through in your life, and they have different identities related to them, right? And certain of these things are salient or more salient in different places. And certain of them enhance your roles. So let's say, for instance, you're at work and you're in your manager sort of role, and you're cruising along, you're managing people, you're doing a lot of work, and you get a text or a phone call from school that I used to get a phone call that my kid was sick and I needed to go pick him up from daycare. And when he first started daycare, he was sick all the time, so I felt like I was constantly fielding calls. And so I would just get in a groove as a professor. I'd have my researcher hat on or my professor hat on, and then I would just get pulled out of it, and I would be having to put my mom hat back on again. Um, those are the sorts of things we talk about when we talk about work versus non-work, that these are two separate things and they have different responsibilities, different expectations. And we often might hear it called like work versus life or work versus non-work. And sometimes, because the two biggest spheres in people's lives are usually work and family, you might hear it called that too. Some of you guys on the talk here today might have one of your biggest spheres of identity is school, right? And some of the research that I started doing when I was in graduate school, we talked a lot about, well, if you're not working full time, your school might be this huge big identity, and perhaps some of you guys are in school and working, right? And you have family and you have hobbies and you have, right, all of these sorts of things. And again, it's about how you manage all these things together. And so this is the foundation that we're going to pull on as we talk for the rest of today. So let's set the stage for you. This is a topic that captures people's imaginations, and these are cartoons that came out pre-COVID. So the ones that have come out since COVID are even more cutting, biting, applicable. I don't know however you want to say it. But I always like this one for the Onion. I always feel the Onion kind of, you can find these ones that really cut to the chase of a moment where, it says he's trying to find the right work anxiety, life anxiety balance, which acknowledges really kind of the ridiculousness of trying to achieve balance. But that's often the metaphor we hear, right? Like, I'm going to find work-family balance, work-life balance. I'm going to be balanced in my work and life. And one thing I think that the pandemic has exposed is how difficult it is to achieve balance, and definitely how difficult it is to maintain it. And the cartoon on the right I really like because I think it again exposes the myth that you can do these things without sacrifice. In this, you have the CEO saying, this is pointing to the pictures on his desk and saying, this is the family I would have if I believed in a work-life balance, right? Acknowledging that to get to the position that he's in, he was not able to, as they say, have it all. He sacrificed the family that he would have had he actually believed in balance. Obviously, there's the cutting nature to that too, satirical nature, in that he is the CEO and can absolutely set policy and guardrails up. I read a wonderful article from a woman, and I'm going to talk about boundaries here today. And a woman, and she had written, Ann Peterson's her name, and she had written that what we really need is guardrails instead of boundaries. And if I was giving this conversation, this talk to a bunch of executives, I might be talking about how you set up guardrails, how you provide boundaries for your employees. And we're not talking about that. So I'm going to talk about what you personally can do to set your own boundaries. But that's kind of the kicker here with the CEO is, he's in a position where he absolutely could promote work-life balance and chooses not to. And so both he bears the weight of his own choices, but also then fills those choices down to other people, which is, of course, something I think we've all experienced in different sorts of ways. But what these cartoons capture is how much we're wedded to this idea of balance. That balance is the thing we're achieving, right? We're trying to do. One thing I love about, this stock photo is how precarious it is. What is work-life balance? Well, it's a precarious thing, and it implies that there's this state of being that you can achieve where you are balanced. And so I think about if I'm taking yoga and I'm in tree pose and I'm standing there and I'm balanced and I'm thinking, think about how much work it takes to hold that balanced pose, and how, if you're getting to a minute, you're doing great, right? And then you're done. You can't hold it any longer than that. But when we talk about work-life balance, we're implying, well, there's a state you should achieve and you should hold it forever, be balanced forever. And when we're not, we feel pretty guilty about that. So we don't only just feel guilty about the sacrifices we have to make to maintain balance. When we don't actually achieve balance, we feel guilty about that too, because we're always told that, yes, we should be able to balance things. We should find this elusive sort of balance. And it's one reason why it's my least favorite metaphor, probably of all time, that's related to the work that I do. I prefer, as I used at the beginning of the title of this talk, a more active, engaged sort of metaphor, integrating work and life. Managing work and life, or even juggling work and life, which at least demonstrates that there's an active process that's going on through all of these components of your life. You might think this is a minor thing, but it's not, because the language we use starts to get filtered into the goals that we make for ourselves and for our companies. And then that gets trickled down into the practices and policies that we put into place. And so it's really important to select the right metaphor. And when you select the metaphor of work-life balance, what are you implying to your employees? That there's this magical state that you can achieve where everything is in perfect balance. And I think most of us could look at our lives and say that probably isn't an apt descriptor of who we are. And so I think it's important that we talk about those sort of metaphors and understand that achieving a balanced life looks like something very, very different for different people. So even if you do insist on using this idea of balance because you like what it implies to folks, you should at least sort of acknowledge that it takes work to achieve it and work to maintain it. And that these sorts of this balanced, set of rocks that you see will look very different for different people because we want very different things. Another important thing about this is that this does differ by gender. What we're expected to achieve differs by gender. What we want to achieve in terms of what we value, there are differences across gender there. There are differences culturally. And there are differences just on a very individual level. And so it does matter how we use these sorts of things. And I think back to an article that came out years ago, which was, women can't have it all. And it was this idea, and I always kind of smiled at that a little bit, saying, well, we never could. Like, you set up this straw man that we could achieve it all, and then you're kind of frustrated with us that we can't. But no one ever really thought that they could, right? Because there's just a limited amount of time, limited amount of energy. But it also demonstrated, I think, to how we set ourselves up for failure when we select metaphors and goals that don't abide by the reality of our lives. And so when you're in an organization, you should be careful with that. But you should also be careful with that when you're setting your own personal goals and thinking, well, what does balance mean for me? Shake that off and say, okay, maybe balance is the wrong thing, because you know what, there are certain times where I'm gonna be working 16-hour days and I'm not going to feel balanced. And that's okay, because that's what it requires. And I recognize that it takes that sacrifice. And I'm going to think about balance in a different way, perhaps. So maybe, I'm thinking about it. I'm an accountant and I'm thinking about this seasonally. And I know that these next couple months are historically awful for me. But you know what? June's going to be great. And I'm going to take a really great long June. And, you can think about balance in different ways. And you can think about the intersection and the juggling of work and life in different ways that help you create a metaphor that helps you craft the life that works for you. So in this process of crafting, there's a really important concept that comes up that I alluded to earlier, which is about boundaries. And one of my favorite theories in the research that I use is called boundary theory. And this is a visual that comes from one of our, kind of classic boundary theory articles that's trying to illustrate what it means to have boundaries between these domains. And again, it chooses work and family. These are the two biggest sort of domains that we talk about in organizational psychology. And it's demonstrating here visually that you have, the work domain that has people who are in that domain and people who keep the border, saying, put your phone down, pay attention, those sorts of things. And the same in family. You have border keepers, people who are like, Mom, are you on your phone again? Mom, are you answering email? My daughter coming down the stairs at 3 o'clock when she comes home from school. And I'm working here from home, and she comes in the door and she's like, help me with my homework. You're done for the day, right? She's a border keeper. She's saying, you are done with your work life, and it is now time to transition to your family life. And we are border crossers throughout the day sometimes, particularly I think during COVID, we're crossing that border when every time I leave my home office and I walk up the stairs to the kitchen, I'm crossing that border. I might run into my husband or my son or my daughter if she's home. You're blending those two sorts of things. And then there are incursions or interruptions or permeations that happen. So it's not just the blending of the borders, but, I am in a work call, a work meeting, and, I get a call from daycare that I need to pick up my kid, or you're at family, you're at home, and you get an email from a student and they're frantic and you need to help them. So these are the sorts of incursions that can happen. So this is a very simplistic view, but a way to kind of demonstrate that there are these blended borders, and sometimes the transitions between them are physical. You get in your car, you drive to work, right? Sometimes they're psychological. Okay, I'm gonna breathe. What is the typical thing I do first thing when I come down to my home office? I answer my email, whatever it is, right? You think about that psychological transition from one domain to the other. But one thing that's really interesting about this idea is this is very descriptive. There are domains and there are borders, and people transfer between them. But what this doesn't capture is the fact that there aren't just descriptors where we move from border to border, but there are things that people want, right? So sometimes people are okay with having that border, that area of blending being really big, right? I'm okay with all that. Some people are okay with those permeations being a lot, and some people are not okay with any of that. They need these things to be separate. And when we ignore that there are these differences in what people want, we come up with all one size fits all policies, right? So we say, okay, everybody work from home. And if you're a person who wants and really, really wants to keep their work and their family lives separate, you are very upset by this, right? Because you don't want to work from home. You don't want work anywhere near your home. You want these things to be completely separate. And so this forced work from home from COVID has probably been driving you nuts, not just because of COVID, but because it's against your values of what you want and what's important for you. Even me, who's an integrator, and I'm going to talk about here on the next slide, it's hard because it's not just like I am here, I don't have control over it, right? And so that lack of control is hard. But when we ignore that, and so there is research that came out, for instance, that says, when companies put in flexible work options, but don't address the fact that employees want different things, those flexible work options don't actually make their employees' lives better. They don't use on-site childcare because they don't want their kids on site. I don't want them on site. I don't want them to be that close to me. I need these things to be separate. I'll give you an example from when I was in graduate school. There was a colleague that I had, and he would come in every day, and he would come into work, and he would shut the door, and he would work from 7:30 a.m. to 3:30, and we would only see him when we'd leave to go to the restroom or what have you. Hey, and he would kind of nod his head and fine. And he would leave at 3:30 every day. And every day when he would leave his office, he would never bring anything with him. Okay. This was strange for me. He would never bring a book. He would never bring a computer. And this was pre like iPhone days. I know I'm dating myself, but pre iPhone, there were Blackberries, but it wasn't the same where you weren't like answering emails all the time, right? You weren't expected to do that. You had your computer or your laptop at home. He never brought anything home. And I was baffled by this. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is he so productive and he never works from home? I'm working constantly, right? And it wasn't until I learned about border theory, which was really new at the time, that I realized, oh, we're different, right? He never does any work at home because he doesn't want to. Like it makes him supremely unhappy to have to share that time that he would spend with his wife and his friends with work. I'm different, right? I will go to yoga at 1 p.m. So that's my life incurring into my work time. I'll go out and I'll eat lunch. I'll, answer phone calls. Maybe I'll pay some bills online, or I'll do this sort of stuff, or I'll take a break and then I'll work at night, or I like to integrate my work and my family role. So it wasn't that his way was better, it was that it fit him better. And that's what I want for you guys, is to learn, well, what do you want? And figure out how you can manage boundaries in a way that helps you to be both happy and productive. So, boundary management. Who are you? So, at its most basic level, it's this idea of separators. I want these things to be separate. Integrators, I'm okay with it all blending. And volleyers, I go back and forth between wanting things separate and wanting things integrated. This, idea came up about probably 20 years ago when they started to say, oh, there are individual differences here. Like people want different things. And they want different, boundaries that are both physical, time-based or temporal, and cognitive. Like I think about these things different, and people have different segmentation preferences. And then about probably 5 years ago, researchers started saying, but maybe these aren't symmetric, right? 5, 10 years ago, maybe these aren't symmetric, meaning maybe I like to separate work and family. But if I have to integrate, I want to integrate family, right? I would be more okay with doing work at home than doing home stuff at work, right? So you start to figure out, well, which are you prioritizing, and what are you protecting? And then we started to get more complicated in terms of how we think about these sorts of things, right? There are periods that define each, periods where I'm segmenting, periods where I'm integrating. I'm fully an integrator, or I'm fully a segmenter. And as I said before, I've always been more of an integrator. And my colleague I was just giving you the example of was more of a separator. One of the things that I provided as part of this, so I am about 1 year into being the faculty director for the Dorr Women's Leadership Program here at the Tippie College of Business. Kathy Dorr and Henry Tippie have generously provided for a program to support women at Tippie across the entire college, at the level of undergraduates, graduate students, faculty, and supporting the Tippie Women's Summit is something that we have historically done. One of the things that I'm doing is stepping into this role, which stay tuned to this space. We're going to have a lot of announcements that come up on how we're going to grow this role, is looking for everything in the Tippie College of Business that is promoting women, women in leadership, and giving opportunities, and promoting equality and equity. And as part of that, I have provided to everybody who has registered today. So everybody who registered before midday on Tuesday should have got an invitation from the Center for Creative Leadership to participate, to fill out this survey for the work-life indicator. If you have since registered, you will get that invitation this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So keep your eye open for that. And you have about a week to fill it out if you haven't filled it out yet, and you'll get a reminder for that too. And then we'll send you a PDF that has a report. And what's really cool about this is, first of all, everybody loves quizzes, right? But unlike quizzes like, what Bridgerton character are you, right? This is something that is based in research. And Ellen Kosick and Brenda Lauch came up, with these ideas of thinking through this in sort of profiles. Are there profiles of people, things that we can think of that are typical or common based on how they respond to certain survey questions? And in Ellen Kosick's book, CEO of Me, she talks about this. She talks about, well, how do you understand yourself better so you can get what you want out of your work and your family lives? And the one thing that I really like about the work-life indicators, I think it reflects our Tippie values a lot, in that, first of all, it's about knowledge, right? It's based in evidence and in research, and it's accessible, and it helps people to solve their problems, which I think is really, really nice. So if you look, you can kind of see, what she talks about in here are things that what you identify with, your work sphere, your family sphere. And then she also talks about things like, what your boundary control is, right? Which is what sort of, control you have over the separation between work and life. So For example, I'm going to give you some examples here, and then I'm going to talk about the report that you guys will get. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you guys will get it yourself, and it's something you can not tangibly, you're not going to hold it in your hand, probably unless you print it out. But it's there for you. So it's a resource you can come back to on behalf of myself and the Door Women's Leadership Program here at Tippie, to be able to say, here's some information about you, and here are some activities that might help. So it's asking you a little bit about the domains you identify with, right, primarily, but it acknowledges that you can identify with both. So a lot of sort of research will say, well, either you identify with work or family, which is not true. People can highly identify with both of those roles, and they do a lot. We just talked about identities, a few slides back, and you saw how you can have multiple identities, and there's no reason to say these things need to be in opposition to one another. But what I like is it also acknowledges that there's control that people have over their boundaries, and then there's sometimes that you don't. So take a look at that box that says both and low boundary control. I feel like for myself, I have been in this overwhelmed reactor box like all pandemic long, where I identify with my work a lot. I'm identifying with my family a lot, particularly during this time because, things are crazy and I really want to be there for everybody. And I don't have that much control over my boundaries right now. Everything seems to be sort of collapsing on each other. And I feel like I've been this overwhelmed reactor for a while, where beforehand would be more of this sort of fusion lover where I identify with both, but I'm really trying to mix and meld a little bit. And control my boundaries the way that I feel that I want to. So maybe I'll take a middle of the day and I'll go work out and I'll watch a movie. And then after the kids go to bed, I'll pop my computer open and write for a while, but I have control over that. And I feel like, during the past year, I haven't. But this has been a really good source of knowledge for me to say, okay, who am I? What do I identify with? What sort of things are in my control and what aren't? The work-life indicator, I think, is nice because it's going to give you some norming information of where you are. It's going to give you this label, which is always fun. I think it keeps you engaged in what you're doing. But then it tells you a little bit about what that means for you. What sorts of strengths and weaknesses is that going to reflect on at work? What are some things you can do about that, which I think is very helpful. Know thyself, I think, is a really, really good thing to do. I always feel like I'm more in control when I have more information. But I also like at the end, there are some time management exercises which talk about, ways that you can say, well, what do I want to be and where am I now? So you can start to move yourself closer, in the words of our inimitable Dean Kristof Brown, to fit between what your values are and where you are in your life or in your organization, and try to find more congruence there than you have otherwise. So when I took the work life indicator, I took it in 2019. So my son had just turned 1. He had just started daycare. At that point, I was a family focused integrator. I've been an integrator like my whole life. So I was not, unexpected, but I was surprised to see I was more family focused and work focused at that point. And I think that was very reflective of where I was in my career. These things change. These are not static, right? We fluctuate in terms of what we value and what we identify with. But this was helpful information for me because I realized, oh, I'm protecting one domain more than another. I'm protecting my family life. I am, for probably the first time in my career, not working in the evenings as much as I would before, right? I'm protecting this family life because, my children are at a certain age, et cetera. And this was really useful for me because it made me look and say, well, is that what I want, right? What are the implications of which domain I'm protecting? And I realized I was okay with that. I can't stay like that forever, but in that point in time, I was okay with that. And that knowledge helped me, I think, feel like I had more control over my situation. And so again, you guys, if you don't have it yet, if you can't open the link that we sent you for the survey, all of that, I know at UIHC, Dropbox links are a little difficult when you're on your work computer, so you might want to use your home computers for that. Alternatively, if you guys have not got your invitation, you can, if you haven't heard anything about this by tomorrow morning, just shoot me an email, or Ashley. Ashley has been wonderful at helping me put this together to get this for you, because again, I just think knowing yourself is such a powerful tool, particularly when it's couched and grounded in such good research. And I really am appreciative of putting stuff like this together, because you see a lot of personality traits, you see a lot of profiles, that aren't as necessarily grounded in research, things like Myers-Briggs, things like, Enneagrams that are fun and they help us to know ourselves, but they aren't really grounded in a lot of research, and this is. And so hopefully you'll find it as helpful as I did in really thinking about myself. And I really do recommend the exercises at the end, because learning how to manage your own boundary conflicts can be really, really helpful and kind of wrenching back some control over your life. And these things tend to affect women even more than men, particularly when they enter in the family stage of their lives. One thing that came up when I started studying gender is I realized very, very quickly that a lot of what I was seeing in terms of gender was really about family. So it wasn't that people thought necessarily when I was coming up in graduate school and an undergraduate and master my MBA program that women weren't good. It was that they kind of I felt like they were expecting, okay, well, when's she gonna have babies? When is she gonna be family focused and not work focused anymore? Like I feel like they were waiting for that shoe to drop. Um, and there was this assumption that as soon as I had children, I wasn't going to be the same person that I was. But the assumption was not that that was a good thing, that maybe I would be more innovative or more creative or more compassionate as a leader. It was, well, I'm not going to be as dedicated to my job, and therefore I'm not going to be as worth investing in. And so when I started studying these things, I felt like they're inextricably linked. I felt like I couldn't link away how women leaders and women are treated and this work family expectation. And so for me, figuring out, well, what can we control was really a gender issue, because managing impression management was really big. I'm the simultaneously trying to change societal culture, I'm trying to change organizational culture, but you're still living within those organizations and in that society, and so you have to figure out how to navigate for yourself as well. And one of the things that's come out of this is some really interesting research on crafting. So you might have heard of the job crafting literature, right? How do you be proactive and take ownership for the sort of job you want and put this together in a way that meets your goals and your skills? Well, work-life crafting is something that particularly young professionals have a lot of success engaging in, which is saying, well, what sort of work-life, you know, balance or configuration fits you best. And the work life indicator can help with that, but it's obviously just a snapshot. So you'll want to revisit the same sort of ideas over time. Where are you and what do you want? But it allows you to say, well, okay, well, I'm going to craft this in the way that I want it to be. I'm going to ask for help in these sort of behavioral ways, leverage technology to help me do these things more quickly. I'm going to control my work time and, think about things in different ways. Perhaps it's cognitive. So I talked earlier about crafting or thinking about your metaphors. Perhaps it's cognitive. Perhaps it's how you think about the way work and life intersect that you need to deal with. Like, this is the reality of the career I've chosen. It's never going to be, I'm an accountant. It's never going to be balanced in this way. It's always going to be, tax time is always going to be this way. This is the season. This is the way it goes. And other sorts of professions have seasons like that as well. If you're in video game technology, right, the time before this project is launched, right? So I'm a big Zelda Breath of the Wild fan, right? And the new one, we were just waiting with bated breath for when the new Breath of the Wild 2 is going to come out. And the folks who are working on that, leading up to launch, you're talking incredible work days. And when you sign on to that, you're passionate about it, but you also have to be realistic about the career you've chosen and think about how you can craft balance into your life the best way you can, and where you want to be proactive. And if you're a manager, you want to think about those things too, right? You're crafting your own work life, but you need to acknowledge that your employees might not want the same things that you want. And, allowing them to find ways that fit their values best will allow them to be the most innovative, creative, and productive people that they can be. Um, so work-life crafting is something that you can absolutely start to do, is really picture the sorts of work-life interactions that you want and think about what you put into place to set expectations appropriately, to manage the way you think about your work and your non-work lives, and work through it in that sort of way. Inevitably, however, that doesn't always work, right? So we can talk about crafting all you want, but stress is still going to come up. And when that stress comes up, we have to think about how we cope with that. One of the things that comes up a lot is time allocation. I can't tell you how many times I hear people who are stressed out being told, well, you just need to learn how to manage your time better. That's callous and not the recommendations. If you're a leader, please don't say that. That's not helpful. But time management is and can be helpful when you are proactive about doing it to the best of your ability. What's cool about this is there is research on time management too. It's not just what a random guru might tell you. There absolutely are things that we can learn from research that can help you think about managing your time better. So the big thing here is thinking about why time management works, and the why it helps with stress is not because time management is this crazy animal that's different from everything else. It's because it's about control. And so I've been talking about control a lot. Control is critical. People feel less stressed out when they feel more in control. And things like time management can help us, even if it's not true, to feel more in control. And sometimes that's what we need. So, for instance, we find that people, when they're under stress, might pivot to easier sorts of tasks or quick wins. Um, and sometimes if we do that too much, right, that is bad for our productivity, but it actually can be a really nice way to flip your perception a little bit and find an easy win. I find this with writing a lot. There's an advice from writing that you're having trouble writing, just write something. It can be horrible. Type out the lyrics to your favorite song if you need to. Just get something on paper, get yourself going. And that absolutely does work for me. Um, Thinking about technology incursions and the fact that, it's all about control. And so thinking about how you can use technology. One thing that I have done, for instance, is when I need to break away, when I recognize that my desire to integrate is actually causing me more stress because I've lost some control. I will actually put like two-factor in authorization and certain other, like, hide certain apps. So I have to make extra clicks to check them on my phone. So I can't just, like, how you do that swipe, 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 swipe all the time, doom scrolling, whatever. It's just natural what you're doing with your thumb, right? All going on. If you take an extra step where you have to actively log on and I have to go and do a whole other thing, I'm less likely to like doom scroll my emails, right? I'll wait. And that helps me. And again, that is something that I've had to do for my time management of how I need to manage my stress. When we talk about time management, there are three major things here. Um, there is, setting goals. So you can't achieve something if you haven't identified what it is. So set goals of what you want to, what sort of things that you want to be able to do. So, what is it that you want to achieve, and then prioritize tasks to get there. That changes a lot for me on a weekly basis, what my goals and my priorities are, but I know what they are. And that helps me a lot. Organization is another thing. This is something that was hard for me to learn. Like, I was really good at my space. Like, my desk seems clean and my space seems clean. And organization, it helps you to jump, instead of spending your morning like organizing yourself, you can jump straight in and take advantage of a nice 30 minutes of work in the morning. Um, like, for me, that works. But for me, it's been my desktop clutter, like, on my computer. I'm really bad about naming files. I have like version 1 underscore edit underscore 2 underscore 3, right? Like, I'm really bad about that. Organizing my folders has helped. I've also started keeping checklists. So that mechanics component, I've always kept checklists my whole life. You guys know who you are, the checklist people. You're always looking for that new journal, the new colored pins, right? You get the good ones, everyone, right? Every Christmas, it's like, oh, look at this beautiful journal that I fill with stuff. I have like 5 of them sitting right over off screen right now. Every time that I feel like I'm getting out of control, I buy a new journal, because I'm sure that is the thing that's going to help me keep it all back under control. One of the things that I have done is I started using the sticky notes on my laptop, and I keep my notes so it's right there on the screen, so I can type out my thoughts with a little bit more, like, detail. But then it's really overwhelming sometimes because I have all these brightly colored sticky notes screaming at me. So then I just close out the program and I just don't look at it for a while. And that helps bring me down, because again, it's under my control. And so again, any of these things that you can choose that help you feel like you're in more control, you have more things under more control, are useful. Again, however, sometimes that doesn't even work, right? We all have a lot of us who there's just nothing we can do, right? Our situation is ridiculous, right? We're being asked to do more stuff in less time than ever before, and we're really stressed about it. And that's, I think, a reality of where we are right now. It's something when I talk to, if I were talking to organizational leaders right now within a certain organization, I would be talking about this slide a lot. Wouldn't be talking about how do you help your employees keep better checklists. No, no, no. I'd be talking, how do you help them cope with stress? How do you help them figure out what they want and reach those goals? So eventually, you are going to get to this point. I know I have it multiple times during this past year. And, the three main sort of ways of coping that we see people do is first is avoidant sort of coping, which is I'm to distract myself, right? This is what I call this is my doom scrolling, right? Where I can't look at this paper anymore, and I pick up my phone and I start to just doom scroll through whatever. Perhaps I am, looking at TikTok, which I don't actually do. My daughter does, but I just can't stop looking at them. I don't know. And, or, you're watching whatever it is, just binge watching some show, it's some way to avoid and disengage from the thing that's causing you most stress. And it's a coping mechanism, and it absolutely is something that we do, and it can work. We also have emotional sorts of coping, venting. Some of my colleagues might be on this call that I vent to. Sorry, the ones I text when I just need to get it all out. Or humor. Sometimes we use self-deprecating humor, some ways to sort of joke about that. Um, and then there's active coping, and this is actually the most effective type of coping. It's also the hardest because it means you have to seek advice. You have to show vulnerability, and that's hard. Um, and it also, can be trying to find a learning growth opportunity within a hard thing, which is not always easy because growth is painful too. So, those sort of things can be the most effective in reducing stress, but they're also the hardest to do. So the more you can do when you're out of a stressful moment to build your capacity for finding people to seek advice from and help from, so that when you do get in the midst of one of those stressful valleys, you have that infrastructure in place, that's helpful. The last two things I put on there are the two things that I think people don't do as much as, but that they could do, right? It's easy for me to say, find someone to seek advice for. And you're like, haha, I don't have that person. No, thanks. Um, but we can all sleep a little more, I think. Um, go to sleep. Like I always say, turn off, quit Zoom scrolling. It's not going to change anything. Like nothing has been posted in the last 30 seconds when you refreshed last time. Just go to bed. Guided relaxation and exercise actually does work. If you can, practice some of this mindfulness. We do have a lot of research out that mindfulness absolutely can help. And I know it sounds kind of wonky, but it actually does work. Just keep yourself in the present and not let your brain catastrophize where you're going and going and going. I find guided meditation to be really difficult. Last time I tried it, I felt like I was having a panic attack, like just sitting there in myself, still not good. I can do mindfulness and meditation a lot better when I'm moving. So I do that when I take walks, or I do yoga. If I don't do yoga a lot, I should do more of it, but I can't do it like on my own. I need someone to walk me through it, like someone with a really nice soothing voice to tell me how to do things. But that's what I found for me. And so when I'm feeling very overwhelmed, I turn to those two things. I'm like, go to bed, Beth, right? Go to bed, just turn your phone off and go to bed. And particularly guided yoga, which has helped me, or a walk where I'm just, listening to, as my daughter would call it, an aesthetic music, which she doesn't know what aesthetic means, but that's what they call the playlists on YouTube. So that's what she listens to. So again, work life, the metaphors you use matter. We all have boundaries, even if they've been run roughshod over during this whole pandemic. We absolutely have boundaries and what we want from boundaries. And so knowing yourself and what you want is an important tool. But even then, sometimes, there's things that are out of our control, and figuring out what time management behaviors might be able to help, or what sort of coping mechanisms might be able to help, can all help us to manage our boundaries just a little bit better. So I'm going to move to Q&A now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I'm not this tiny little, thumbnail at the top. And Ashley, I think, is going to help moderate some of the Q&A from the chat and from the Q&A function. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you'll see me pop back up, and then we'll come back. I'm good?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks so much, Beth. We did have a couple of people asking about the quiz itself. So I was hoping maybe you could just go back there. It's a little bit of logistics. Some folks are wondering if they can take that quiz again.
Second time, huh?
Yes, they're wondering, how does that change over time? And I know you addressed that a little bit, but I thought we could just go ahead and kind of retouch on that.
That's a great question. So I provided it's the cost to do this sort of survey. And so I provided it for everybody for this one, but the website, the Center for Creative Leadership, you can take it. You can go online. You can ask your friends to take it. They have to pay for it, but you can take it and they'll send you a report, anytime that you want. I have not taken it again because for me, reading it, it made me understood where I was, but it also made me understood where I could have been. And so I didn't need to read it to know, but I'm a researcher in this. I understand the constructs. So of course it made sense for me. Like I would know where I would fluctuate. So I think it's useful to do that. I have found folks who have given this to their team, right? Their team leaders, and they've given this to their team and they felt like they know their team a little bit better. But you need the trust of your team to do that, because it can feel a little bit vulnerable to kind of ask them to share these moments with themselves. Logistically, if you guys want to know, so Center for Creative Leadership will send you a link to take it. then that will go to scoring, and then they send me a PDF and I forward it to you. Yes, that is a ridiculously sort of circuitous sort of thing, but we're working on that with the Center for Creative Leadership to get it directly to you a little bit more quickly. So we did them in batches, and so you should have gotten links to it throughout the early part of the week. And if you have not, I will set up reminders to go out tonight, so you should get the link by tomorrow. Yeah, so we can take it. It is, again, I find power in knowledge. Not everybody is that way. Some people find like they feel very small when they know more stuff, which I think is completely reasonable too. I find power in it. And so for me, it was just knowing where I was in that snapshot that allowed me to have a lot more knowledge.
All right. This is from an anonymous person, but I thought it's a good question. We're approaching a time where a lot of change is anticipated as the pandemic starts to wane. What kind of policy changes should we be advocating for in this time?
That's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked it. Um, I'm an overly optimistic person. Like I'm to the point where I think probably I annoy people with my positivity sometimes, but you know what? It's fine. It's who I am. Can't change who you are, right? Um, and I think that, I am hopeful that this is an opportunity, that with all of the suffering that has occurred, that we actually have an opportunity to actually see real change enacted. And so if you're thinking about that, I'm on the University of Iowa's Future of Work Committee, where we're actually asking those exact questions. What can we do to craft that? Um, One thing that I like to talk about is, and the thing that I've learned from being a researcher, is always ask the why things work. So not just what policies we should put into place, but what's the mechanism? And I always come back to control. So if you think about policies, you're going to hear a lot of people talking about work from home, work from home, work from home, right? We need to allow people to work from home because you can't put that back in the bottle. You can't tell people, no, you can't work from home when you've been working home for a year. Like, yes, I can, right? Um, but what I think, I hear a lot from business leaders when I talk to this, but this isn't fair because our line workers can't work from home, our cashiers can't work from home. And so isn't it fair that marketing gets to work from home? If they, right? And again, as a researcher, I'm like, we need to talk about the definitions of what you care about. Like, what do you mean by fair? Right? What do you mean by fair? What do you mean? So in work from home, what are you actually trying to do? You're trying to give people control over their lives, over their schedule. And there are lots of different ways you can do that. And I always like to laugh. I'm like, you don't give your employees enough credit. They know they can't be a cashier from home. Like they know. So you don't have to, say, well, you don't have to protect them from that. You can have an honest conversation and say, okay, well, you can't do your line manufacturing work from home. I'm sorry. Like, you know that, I know that, like, we're not stupid. We got it. But are there other ways that we can help you feel like you have more control over your schedule? Are there other ways that we can help you feel like you have more control over your life? And that's all people want, is to feel trusted, to feel respected, and to have some control. And I think there are lots of ways we can do that. And so in terms of policies and procedures, I would always ask the question, well, how is this helping our employees feel like we trust them and that we're trust them enough to give them control over how they do their jobs? Um, in the research we've been doing with the university, we ask people and we ask clinical workers, like our clinical workers, they know that they can't see patients like the type of work that they do. Most of them can't do that from home, and they know that, and they love their jobs, and they chose their jobs knowing that they wanted to help people in the way that they're doing. But that doesn't mean that they also don't want to have some control over their schedules, over how they do their jobs. They don't want to feel trusted in how they do that. And so I have a colleague named Michelle Williams. She's a professor in our department, brilliant. And, she talks a lot about this in the medical sort of field about innovation. And she's like, trust. And one thing that I've always pulled from her work is this idea of where trust is, like, trust people to know how to do things really well. And like, if you give them resources, they can find creative ways to do things. And so that's, I think, the policy I would like to see come out, is that we've had to manage differently. I have to trust that you're going to do your job because I can't see you, right? I have to trust that. So if we can continue that sort of trust and giving people control, I think we would be in a good place.
This sort of builds off of that. Any advice to have a difficult conversation with managers when work-life configuration isn't working for you, especially if they are not flexible with work hours?
Yeah. So difficult conversations, I'm not going to give, like, obviously each individual situation is different. So I'll just caveat with that. But I think, there is if you can understand what they want you to do is to be able to figure out how to get your job done. And a lot of times I think this sort of mistaking monitoring for management. So I don't know. I've never been trained how to be a manager. And so I always think it's me looking over your shoulder and saying, good job, or do this differently. Like that's what I think management is. Um, and so if I can't do that, I feel like I don't have control over the situation. And so if you can empathize and say, okay, well, they feel like they don't have control. Okay. So how can I alleviate their concerns about that while giving myself more control? Right. So that helps me to frame my conversation a little bit better, which is I know, you might be concerned with my ability to be productive when I'm setting my own schedule, because, it's not the way that you like to work best. And I think, perhaps we can try this out for a little bit and see if I can meet your goals while also, giving myself a little bit more autonomy over my schedule. Because really, people work differently. Like I saw found this thing, people work differently. And the best way that I can be productive is to have this sort of control over my schedule. And so here's what we'll do. Why don't we try, to see if I can meet my goals for you over this, quarter, and we'll see how it goes, and then we'll revisit it. And I think acknowledging what their concerns are, and giving a very, time bound and specific sort of proposal, even two proposals, like we can do this or we can do that. Which do you think it would work best for you? Those I think tend to be the most successful conversations. They aren't always successful because culture is real and there are people who are good and bad bosses, and we know that. But I would say that's how I would approach that sort of conversation: is what do I think their sticking point is? Is it fairness? Do they feel like if they're giving me special treatment, or is it control? And try to, adjust my address in that way.
And a quick caveat to that, on the Tippie webinar series on the YouTube channel that I keep mentioning, there is a whole webinar from Professor Amy Colbert on difficult conversations in the workplace. So I would strongly encourage, that was an anonymous question, but I strongly encourage you to check out that, because that might be some really helpful information in there as well. Another question is, what is the role of email in violating the balanced configuration we want? And is there a best practice for managing that?
Um, wow. Yeah. So email has been a mechanism by which people's boundaries have been violated, right? Like that's how it happens. Um, and really what I think that comes down to is expectation, and what we think our own expectations are. So um, one thing that I think has been an opportunity that's come out of this pandemic has been the fact that we've had to communicate our time and our boundaries in different ways, because it's not an expectation I'm in the office at this time. So I've had to say, I'm available between these hours, right? Or I'm not available. And that sort of communication, setting expectations, can work well. I think email is so ubiquitous. And we have, I think, also used email as a signal for too long, right? How fast does someone respond? I can get my thoughts out. And what it's done is it has taken people like me, who's an integrator. I like to email at all hours of the day, and it's put us in direct conflict with people who are segmenters and want to keep these things separate. And if you ask, like Amy Colbert, you just brought up, who is my DEO, she would be the first to say, well, I just send emails when I feel most comfortable to send them, but I don't expect you to respond to them. And I know that because we've had that conversation, but that doesn't mean that sometimes you don't feel like you should. And that it can be that sort of priming moment where you feel anxious. I'm going to forget to do this. I need to do it. I need to do it. So I think there has to be a balance. If you're a manager, set your boundaries, be very clear about them. Say, okay, I won't respond, expect a response within 48 hours, then you can email me again. Or, setting away messages yourself, so you role model those sorts of behaviors. I've never used an away message. I never have. That is a confession. I don't even know how, like, I feel very anxious even thinking about it. And that's my own, I think, very unhealthy relationship with email. Like, I'm constantly on it. But I wouldn't say that's healthy, right? But I have done way better this last year at saying, if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, because I'm a fast emailer, it means I missed it. It got buried. So email me again, right? Because I'm a fast emailer. I've also been very, very specific. Like, you can ask some of my colleagues. I remember sending Steve Courtwright an email when he was on vacation, and I put in the subject, "Do not open this until this date. Like, don't open it." And he didn't. He's like, "I followed your directions, Beth." Right? Like, and I do that with people too. So acknowledging that they've set their boundaries. I need to, and that's just because I was on my phone. I didn't know how to schedule the timing. Otherwise, I would have scheduled it for the day that he came back. So, that doesn't exactly answer your question. I'm sorry, but I think Again, it is absolutely a culprit. And I think the solution to that is going to differ by what we want from it. But I think the first step is communicating our boundaries clearly. Like, I don't respond during this time, or you can email me multiple times or not.
We just had a comment in the Q&A from Michelle who said, my favorite email signature that I have received during the pandemic. If you receive this email outside of traditional working hours, it is because I am working flexibly in a way that works for me. I respect the working patterns of others, and thus I do not expect replies outside of the traditional working hours. Thank you and stay well. That's right to your point.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that so much. And I have to say, in that we had a webinar this past fall at UI, talking about wellness and remote supervision. And one of our colleagues in UIIT was talking about, because they have different ways of managing work, and he was talking about realizing that some of his colleagues had, were working like 3 a.m. and he was like, oh, red flag, red flag. But it turned out to be actually a green flag, because they're like, I finally get to work the hours I want, right? I love work. Like, I like to sleep till noon. Like, I want to do the work this way. And that there was something freeing in that, because again, so much of this actually is about choice. It's about control. And when the pandemic is lifted, you know, this has not been normal work from home because we've been forced to do it. So what do people want? What allows them to have control? I think if you can keep that in the center of your mind and how you can do that yourself, we'll all be better off. Love that. I got it. I
Oh,
need that. I saw someone in chat say, I think it was Lauren is like, give me that. I'm like, Lauren, yes, see, we are on the same wavelength. I need that. For
I
sure.
just asked Michelle if it's okay if I put it in the chat. So if she gives me the green light, I will go ahead and send that to everyone. Let's see, we have time for, I think, maybe 2 more questions. Do you have recommendations for people with coworkers that may judge you or treat you differently for asking to continue to work from home? I don't want to feel guilty for asking what works best for me.
Yes. So I think the team member dynamics is hard. And one of the things pre-COVID that was hard was there would be people who'd be working off-site and other people who would be working on-site. And I think that there was sometimes a feeling that the person who was not working on-site would get short shrift because they weren't in the middle of meetings, right? They weren't involved, they weren't co-located. So they missed out on stuff, and it didn't feel fair. I think one thing that we can continue moving on is to schedule meetings, right? And schedule these sorts of conversations. And that misses a little bit, but it does increase fairness. So you have to think about balancing the control versus fairness. I think when you're asking about what's good for you, again, hitting yourself with a second dart, like you already feel bad about, trying to manage your work and life, and now you feel guilty about feeling bad about it, right? Like, it's that sort of, you don't need that extra sort of guilt. Similar to what I said earlier, which is think about what your boss or your coworkers might be worried about. Sometimes it's petty and there's nothing you can do about people who are petty, right? You just got to move on and live your best life. But sometimes there's real concerns, which is like, I have had a bad experience with people who are not committed to their job and they don't pull their end of the bargain, and I suffer for it because we're interdependent, right? And so if you can, alleviate them and say, oh, well, we're going to schedule these weekly check-ins, and we'll see how this works for us. This is what works best for me. And we'll just check in and make sure it works well for the team, and that I'm putting the team first because the team does better if I'm at my best. And I think that will alleviate some concerns. It's not going to alleviate all of it because, sometimes it's just not a good, sort of thing. And people have their own attitudes, right? But I keep coming back to what works best for you isn't what works best for everybody. And communicating that, I think, is helpful.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Quick one. Got
Quick
it.
one, yes. Do you have any more suggestions for how managers can really set up those guardrails for their employees?
That is a great question. For me, the easiest, lowest hanging fruit is role modeling. And I think that's hard because a lot of us who have made it to positions where we're managing other people have done it by making different choices, right? But role modeling is really important. If you see your employees aren't taking vacation, you need to take vacation. Like, you need to do it. They see you. Your words don't mean nearly as much as your actions do. So role model the behaviors that you want them to engage in. Set your boundaries, set your expectations, say them, right? Have those conversations, tell your own story, which I think is really, really important. And finding these individual check-ins. So if you guys, the Healthier Workforce Center of the Midwest, I work in collaboration with them, so you can go to their website as well. We have some tips. There's some other webinars that Amy Colbert and myself participated in conjunction with Tippie and some Tippie folks as well. Where we had some ideas about how you check in remotely with people. And I think that helps with setting guardrails as well as, but if I were saying the lowest hanging fruit is role modeling. And the other is trying to remember that, and I think this pandemic has shown us more than anything, is that you have to think about productivity alongside wellness and well-being. And you cannot extricate the two from one another.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Beth. And we had so many questions in the Q&A. So I know you're going to share your contact information. So if we didn't get to your questions, we apologize. There were so many and so many great ones, but please feel free to reach out to Beth directly, and she will certainly follow up with you. But again, I want to thank you, Beth, and thank everyone for attending today's Tippie Women's Summit Series presentation, Integrating Work and Life. What does the future look like for work-life management? Again, Beth is happy to take any of those questions. So when our event ends in just a moment, you'll see a quick survey. We'd be grateful if you could share your thoughts to help us make future virtual events even better. On behalf of the Tippie College of Business, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This has been an amazing panel, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Go Hawks!
Yes, I put my email in there. Please feel free to reach out and check out all our resources. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye.